the first time I'm ever interviewing somebody. So happy to be doing it with my friend Ben. We've known each other for a long time. I think the first time we met was in 2003 or 2004 in a park in New York. Ben is the best mixture of a really kind heart, super intense dude who will look you deep in the eye and ask you some serious questions, which always lead to really good conversations. Been lucky to be able to work with him and to call him my friend. I think that the best interviews are always the ones that sort of lead to great stories. I love listening to stories, and I think everybody does. So that's sort of the way I imagine this. Ben, we want to, get to know you a little bit and maybe learn a little bit from you. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and sort of how you got to New York?
Well, first I want to say thank you everybody for joining. That means the world to me. There's some familiar faces and less familiar faces on here, so and names in the for the people that I can't see. So thank you. And in spirit of yesterday and today being the first day with a new president and vice president I feel lightness and happy to be with all these beautiful faces, because it's a breath of fresh air for me personally, and I hope for a lot of people on these screens. So thank you. Yeah, Robbie, I moved to New York in 2000, end of 2000, beginning of 2001, and I ended up doing that after going to fashion school in England. I was on a 4-year course in Brighton, fashion design business and print design. And I'd always sort of come from an artistic background. My dad was an art teacher, which sort of led me that way, and also led me to be free with my decisions of what I wanted to do in life and never be forced into a box of, you need to do this, you need to do that. It was definitely based on a principle of do what makes you happy. What sort of happened is I went to school. That 4-year course was a sandwich course. So there was a year in there, and I spent nearly a year and a half in industry, working for some really cool designers, Copweat Blondell, John Rocha. A lot of you might have heard of Simone Rocha. She was about 5 years old or 4 years old at the time, I think. Now she's a prominent fashion designer herself. John Rocha, Copweat Blondell, and Griffin, all mentors to me, still in touch with some of these people today, and have guided me on my path. Like, I then was looking for a job in London, and I come from a working middle class background, needed to find a job that could support me. Interviewed for some jobs in London, and there was a no game on being able to live in London and take one of those jobs and afford to live. So, some friends of mine had moved to New York from school. And the beauty of New York at that time was it offered, and it still does, offered sort of apprenticeship within jobs, like assistant roles at big companies where you can learn, and you go in and you sort of learn from these masters in trade, and gain mentorship, gain experience, learn from other people's mistakes and your own, which has been important to me along the way. I still make mistakes all the time. And there's people on the screen that can attest to that, whether that's in people management or design choices. But, really, like, my first job was American Eagle. I moved, I got off the first day in Manhattan. I went to a recruitment agent and met with the recruitment agent, and they're like, okay, go and meet with American Eagle. So I just went and met with American Eagle straight after this interview. Ironically, my first experience in Manhattan was getting out the subway, seeing this crowd of people. I walk over to this crowd of people, and there's David Blaine stuck between two big blocks of ice, doing one of his crazy stunts that he did. Anyway, went to American Eagle. They're like, you'll get, met wonderful people in the interview, and they're like, we think you'll get bored here because, you know, this might not be creative enough for you. But I loved the people, and I actually really enjoyed the spirit of the company. I then spoke to people at Tommy Hilfiger and was offered a job at Sean John to work for Puff Daddy at the time. And I went with the job at American Eagle because that, you know, I just got a good vibe, and I believe in that and connection with people. So I went and worked there, and I learned so much. Some of my best friends in the world are from that job. And, you know, back
was
then.
Was that on the menswear side already?
What's
then?
that?
Was that in menswear?
In menswear, yeah. Yeah. At school, I studied men's and women's wear. My final collection was a mix of both. But I went into the menswear world when I hit industry. And American Eagle back then was, I think, about 250 stores. They've probably got 1,000 stores now. So it was a much smaller company. And, you know, you got to learn so much. And, you know, Roger Markfield, who ran the company for a very long time, was at the helm, and you'd have personal conversations with him. And I just learned so much from what I had to do from other people. And back then you were like doing tech packs and faxing them at night. So you'd get all your tech packs and you'd put them on the fax machine, and you'd send them out to Asia, and then it would fail, and then you'd have to do it again. So it was an interesting time because I didn't even have an email address when I first moved to America. So, you know, it was very different back then. You didn't have cell phones and things. Like, I couldn't get one as an English person moving over. So it was a whole different world to what we're in now. Learned so much, met so many good people, but they were probably right with the creativity. I've never been someone that really wanted to create from a product that already existed. I want, you know, like in that sense, I wanted to be able to bring a more modern view on design. And I got recruited for a job at Banana Republic, and Banana Republic at that time in 2002 was an amazing company. Deborah Lloyd, a mentor of mine, was at the helm of creativity there. And I went into that company and worked with Stefan Majanik and Michael Anderson, met some amazing friends, Douglas Stewart, who just won the Booker Prize and, you know, is now a published author. He and I shared an office together, still very good friends to this day. And we just, it was so creative. And what I learned from both American Eagle and Banana Republic was integrity, and integrity behind design, and really having a vision for design, really putting the brand first, and what does the brand stand for, and putting blinkers on and really allowing yourself to see other things. You know, we would travel the world at that point because it was different, because you didn't have the internet to source. But you know, we had to keep blinkers on to make sure that we were doing what was right for the brand and not being overly influenced by what was going on in the market. But there was this beautiful juxtaposition of the two and trying to balance those.
What was your position at Banana?
At Banana, oh God, I can't even remember. I think when I left there, I was a senior designer of cotton sewn knits and B Republic. So B Republic was, you know, Prada Sport, did Prada Sport 25 years ago or something, one of the most influential brands I still think of today. And like every brand I've worked for has admired what Prada Sport did and tried to do a commercial version of. So we had B Republic at that time, and we were definitely like, ahead of our time in a lot of ways with what we were doing with Be Republic, because it really was athleisure a very long time ago. Don't like that word. Don't quote me with that word, Sean, when you do the edit on this. But because athleisure today is commonplace, that is what clothes are. It's become, people have realized that comfort, functionality, and performance is embedded in clothes, and it shouldn't not be that way. People want that from product predominantly. Yeah, so that was sort of the journey. I was there, loved that experience, but I got to this sort of roadblock there because it was such a great company, great mentorship, but I was at this roadblock with how do I grow within this company? And I was there for nearly 4 years, and I realized that all my bosses there had worked in wholesale. And at that point, I just worked in retail, direct retail, which I love. But I realized that there must be something different with wholesale. And I needed to understand what wholesale meant. So Calvin Klein had been trying to bring me over. And I was never sure, to be honest. I'd heard the stories out there and was like, okay, I don't know if this is right for me. And it felt like I was jumping into a pool, which would be a very interesting ride, but it was an amazing experience going there. I took on, 2 whole teams. I ran their white label business from a design perspective. And I worked on their outlet business at the same time. And then they launched a retail business. So there were 3 different businesses. When I got there, their wholesale business was predominantly in Macy's, and it was in, I don't know, 80, 100 doors, something like that. And when I left, it was in 600 odd doors. So it was a huge growth business, fashion orientated, price point driven. But, I think the most important thing is sort of price value equation, and really like trying to balance those things along with like design commerciality. How do you get all those in one package is something that I've really sort of tried to hone in on in my career. For me, designing clothes is to see people wearing them. And that's what's important to me. The love I get from clothes is when friends of mine, I've given them product and they're like, I want another one, or they busted it and worn it for years, and they just fell in love with it, and it became part of them. And to quote Nick Cave, when you create something, you're giving it up, and you're giving it to the interpretation of somebody else. So it's no longer yours. You created something, but as soon as it leaves your hand, or as soon as you've created it, it's now the interpretation of the viewer. So as the viewer takes it on, whether that's creating art, music, clothes, it takes on a different life. And that's what I love about clothes, is there's a life within them, and they form their own personality with the personality that's wearing them. Sort of from a design perspective, some of my team are on here, like they'll have heard this several times, but it's like I've always enjoyed creating clothes that accentuate the wearer's personality versus create the wearer's personality. Perhaps that's because I've personally been more in the commercial world, and so there is this level of needing to sell product. But I've always loved that, because I think that you're enabling people to feel better through wearing clothes. And so that's always been important to me.
I think that's one of the things that really fascinates me about talking to you, because we've had such different paths. I've always sort of, had my own brand, and sort of in that way, sort of total freedom to do, to a certain degree, what I wanted. But what you've done, and then you ended up becoming, what you were the head of menswear at Theory, right? Afterwards, the experience of sort of working with these really widely distributed brands, still keeping your design integrity and doing really great product, but also being really successful at growing the business while having a cool product. That's the difficult part, right? I mean, it's sort of like finding that intersection of where you as a creative are happy with the product, yet it's still understandable and commercially successful. I guess you've just been sort of trained in that, and you've been doing that for so long, but you do it better than anybody else that I know. Is there sort of something over the years that you've learned to get that right?
Well, one, it's not me that does it, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because you have a fixed objective. So you are creating clothes for someone else, and you have to disconnect your personal self to some degree. From an integrity standpoint, you have to maintain, and then you have to try and understand who's going to be buying this product. And that's the line there of like being able to turn the creativity on, but not personalize it too much. And then understand who's going to be wearing this product at the same time and trying to make it cater for them and make their life better. And also to me, like, because I've worked at big companies, and for the longest time now, it's not me personally that's been designing the clothes. I've worked with teams that it's like, I think of my job now more as a curator and an editor of ideas and things that are being brought to the table to help try and bring a vision to life for the brand, and also try and keep the blinkers on and frustrate the life out of some people, trying to keep it as pure as I can. Because that's my role, to try and keep it consistently pure to the vision of what we are trying to create, versus get caught up in over commerciality or look what someone else is doing. Like, it's that finite blend of those things. It's not saying that those things aren't important, but it's this teetering line. And I've seen businesses that have allowed themselves to overweigh on the other side, and then it's a short, long fall that happens. And we've seen a lot of that in recent years with big commercial sportswear businesses. But to me, like, it's being aware that I'm still a student, I think, because every season, every year, I still have to reset myself a little bit and, let go of some of my stubbornness and at points, and learn to be flexible, even though I've gone back to being like strong, like with my point of view. But like, it's the beauty of the people around me that create a product now, and the talent that's around me, because I'm learning from them all the time. That's ultimately my success, is my team, because my team are the people that really bring the ideas to the table and connect. And I think I curate and edit a lot more, and come up with some ideas and work with them. But it's sort of that balance that I love, because then it becomes a bit more like family, and I kind of need things to feel soulful and connected, and I can't just be transactional. It doesn't work for me. It hasn't, and that's a blessing and a curse too, being that way. I know the leaders that are much more transactional, and it works very well for them because there's this distance, and I find like sometimes my closeness to things and people, and it can actually work at your detriment. But it's respecting those boundaries of what commercial clothing is, because we want to have more people wear clothes that we create, that we believe in. And for me, there's there's that side of creativity. And then I have another side of creativity, which allows me to just do what I want without those guardrails. But
That's the
but I don't believe I even do that without creating guardrails. I still have guardrails with that, because, you know, to quote Mark Rothko, one of the most amazing painters the world's seen, you know, he was a complete introvert, drove himself crazy and didn't make it for that long. But like, you know, he said nobody created art for it to not be seen. And so I think, you know, subconsciously, whether it's creating commercial clothes, creating art, music, whatever it is, you want it to be seen, listened to, felt, heard, and you want it to touch people because you want it to leave an indelible mark on someone.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I want to touch on something that's a little bit more personal. I remember that you told me that when you were 27 years old, you sort of had a big change in your life when a doctor had found a tumor behind your knee, which led to a surgery, which then led to you having sort of extreme pain in your life. And the reason I bring it up is because the way that you deal with it on a daily basis, I think is such an inspiration to people. And I think it would be great for everybody to sort of hear maybe that journey just a little bit, and what it is, what are the things that help you deal with that in your life?
I think that, well, what happened was, you know, I've always been into sports. I ran the New York City Marathon. I think it was 2003 or 4, blanking for a second. But I had this lump behind my knee. And before I ran that marathon, they were like, oh, it's a Baker's cyst. It's this cyst that you get from a blood clot. And we'll whip it out, but we'll take it out after the marathon. And I was like, cool, that's no problem, right? And so then I went in for a surgery to take it out. And when they did that, they actually didn't realize the size of it. And, you know, they put me under, took it out, and it was the size of an egg, and it was encapsulated, and it was a tumor. It wasn't a Baker's cyst. And during the surgery, something went wrong. And it ended up rendering me not to be able to physically walk for, I couldn't even put my foot on the ground for nearly a year. And my whole leg atrophied to just bone. And, but that was the easy part. The hard part was I went through this level of pain for that year that was as if, you can't describe it. Pain's very hard to describe to anybody because it's so subjective, but it was as if my leg was permanently on fire and occasionally someone was slashing it with swords. Like, it was that level. I didn't sleep for that year for more than 2 hours in a row ever. And when that happened, that was because I was high on so many drugs, because I was taking 7, 8 pills every 3 hours. So for that first year, I literally was in physical therapy, doctors, acupuncture every day. I still have my job at Banana, and they were incredible. They like supported me in a way that I never had to I never even wrote off sick, but I didn't go to work that much. Occasionally I'd get a taxi into New York, and remember lying on the floor in the office I shared, with my leg up on the desk in screaming pain. And I probably watched more MTV than anybody has that year. And then I had to learn to walk again. And so I was on crutches for a year and a half, and then I walked for a couple of years with a walking stick after that. So I was like a hipster in Williamsburg long before anybody else with a walking stick. But, you know, the challenge with it was it leaves huge scars on you that you don't realize that it's left. And dealing with and tolerating with that level of pain. Every day I still am in some level of pain. I've learned to deal with it differently. You know, I took Vicodin for 15 years. We all know about the opioid crisis in America. Luckily, I don't have an addictive personality to that level, but I definitely have been sucked into that world. What it does is it teaches you a resilience in a good way and in a bad way. And because you become so insular, and the only person that you can truly rely on to get yourself out of it is yourself. The beauty I have in my life is my friends and family. I wouldn't be here without friends and family. That is 100% sure. I can tell you that. But friends and family are the most important thing to me. It teaches, you know, when you go through that level of pain, it teaches you that no matter of money will ever make you happy, or give you anything that's of any value to life. It will give you security, and it will give you some level of security, but it will never make you truly happy. It might give you a blip as you walk out the store. But so for me, like, it was really interesting because it was like in my mid-career and my phase. I started my job at Calvin Klein with a walking stick, which was really challenging because everyone thinks that you're walking with this walking stick to be cool, but you're in this intense level of pain, and you don't want to tell the story all the time. And so, you know, years later, I was diagnosed with PTSD from it and trauma from that, and still have physical problems because of it. You know, I still like to think I can run around the block faster than most people still.
Yeah.
And but that's because I have some instilled resilience in me, that I don't know really where it came from. Probably my family. But you know, that sort of has helped and hindered my career for sure. And some personal things in my life, but it taught me a lot, and it taught me, you know, one of the things that did actually get me, long story short, back to walking again was yoga. Getting into yoga, you know, it all started with a DVD at home, and just that got my body back into some kind of balance, because at that point, the doctors had said they didn't know if I'd ever walk again. And so when you're told that, I think what happened is I decided to not listen. I didn't hear that. Like, I knew they said that, but I didn't ever believe that that might not happen because I couldn't believe that, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably why I have the stubbornness and resilience that I have, you know, because I've seen that grind. But the older I get, and what I've learned from that period of time was dealing with pain and dealing with yourself, you know, the breath and control of your breath, and whether that's yoga, whether that's meditation, whether that's just being in your own, comfortable in your own skin to some degree is really important, and actually showing vulnerability to needing other people. Because my success in my career, my success as a human is only because of other people. It's not because of myself. It's a makeup of all these other things.
So we worked together on the Lululemon collaboration, and I got sort of a peek into your world there, and it all made a lot of sense to me, knowing sort of how you live your life, how exercise and yoga and meditation and the art that you do, and all of that is such an important balance for you. I really felt that is at the core of what Lululemon wants to represent. And so when I saw you there in that environment with your team, it made a lot of sense to me. I saw you being a leader there, and I got to work with a lot of people on your team, and I just I really like the dynamic because you have a sense of authority that's very natural, but you're very caring with the people that work for you, and there's a real loyalty towards you for it. You touched on it a little bit before, but could you talk a little bit about what you see as sort of your leadership style, what things are important for you?
And Ben, before you answer, there's a question that fits here. This is a question for both of you. Julian asks, who is your leadership icon and why? If that helps kind of like fit into your answer or reply.
Well, I think my leadership style comes from, some of it's learned and some of it was innate, and I'm still learning because there's no way I'm perfect. It's trying to have a vision myself for what something could be, but also trying to allow the team to have a vision at the same time and combine those versus dictate it. Because it never works if you try and dictate the vision for something, because it's forced then. And you know, at the end of the day, I can learn as much from the people that work for me as I can give them, and it's a shared responsibility when you're a leader. And I think that's the hard part, really, is like, I have a firm vision, but I also need to balance that with everybody else's vision. But that makes better product, that makes a better brand, that makes better lives for everybody also. So it's like, because, you know, if you don't empower people to be leaders under you, and everybody's a leader and creative, that to me is what's important. And it's, you know, it goes through ebbs and flows, because, you know, I try and be a student, I try and be a teacher, I try and be a mentor. I try and house all those things. And sometimes I can be too hard and too tough. And sometimes you can be too soft and too friendly. There's yin and yang, right? It's about balance, and trying to find, always striving for the level of equilibrium in there. I've been blessed because the teams of people that I've worked with, many that I can see on the screen, and have made me successful. So that's why I'm lucky, because I've been blessed by amazing people, and amazing people that have gone on to do amazing things too. So, you know, when I see the success of people that work for me, and I've got so many like beautiful notes over the years that, like, occasionally I bump into them when I'm cleaning things out, and I'm like, oh man, like, that makes me feel good. And I'm like, well, if that can happen, it's worth it, you know? Because that to me is ultimately what makes me successful as a leader. You know, knowing that you're helping other people succeed with your shared vision versus my vision. If I paint a painting, I can paint whatever I want, and people will like it or not, you know? We live in a funny world now, of what's of value. And I think it's getting tougher and tougher, and it's more challenging for a young person, I think. You know, for a young person, you need to be humble and be an apprentice. You need to look for mentors, but you also need to be an entrepreneur and be your own hero at the same time. So, like, it's again, it's that tough balance because you need to, it's like being a monk or something.
I,
You know,
I agree. I think it's I don't know. I think it's much more confusing nowadays to get into the industry. I felt like when we were starting out, you kind of you apply to a company, and then you work there, and then you choose whether you want to stay on that track, or if you want to go out on your own. And if you decide to go out on your own, then you hope to create some interesting collections. And there was a filter there that would tell you sort of whether what you're doing is interesting or not, and the magazines would take you, and then they would champion you if they liked you. And now it's all just it's weird. It has to be so much self promotion, and there's so much noise out there. And I feel like the sort of the people who used to be sort of the taste makers, or would guide you also as a young designer to more established designers, all of that, it's all very confusing at this moment.
I think it is. And I think like noise is the right word. There's so much noise out there. And I think my advice to the young people on the screen is don't listen to that noise, because everybody now is trying to project this picture of themselves as they've made it, they're successful, and they're already there. And that's okay. But like, it's also good to show that you're working on it, and that you're not there yet, that you need to like invest in getting to where you want to be versus be there overnight. And I think that's what you learn from paying your dues and working hard also, because there's a beauty in the model of people coming out of school and then instantly having this uber successful business that these financial people backed. But those people learn. You just have to listen to these stories of entrepreneurs that have worked that way, and then they hit the wall at some point, and then they have this reality check on themselves, and they're like, was this really what I wanted to do and who I really wanted to be? I remember sitting with a couple of good friends who are very successful designers also one night, and one of them had taken the sort of more in your world, Robbie, of like design for like, but actually yours was different, but like very creative art form design. The other one was a leader at another big company, but he'd had his own business. And then myself, that had always been like scared to not have a paycheck every 2 weeks, probably part of my reason for doing what doing things the way that I've done it. Because, the way I grew up, that's what you do. I remember when I didn't have a job for a little bit and went home after Calvin, and I was going to take a year to make art. My granddad was like, no, you need to go back and you need to go and get a job. Okay. Because you don't do it that way. But to Julian's question, like, my granddad, my father, like my family, my mentors, like my mother, they're some of the most beautiful people I know in the world. And then there's industry people, whether that's Deborah Lloyd or Andrew Rosen, that steered me on my path. Some of them taught you like the school of the hard knocks, that way of teaching you. And it's good to get that too. And it's good to be humbled by that, because it's not easy, and it hasn't been an easy journey, but it's beautiful at the same time, because I think a lot of people are just looking for things to be easy these days. And you don't learn that way. Nobody learns anything from easy. Like, you need to see the dark to see the light. And it's really important to understand that, but to be comfortable in the dark and the light is the battle. To understand when that's happening, that it doesn't always last. I know that with my personal experiences, like, you can get through it in the end if you put the time and perseverance in.
Yeah, I agree. Sean, do you think we should look at some of the questions from the audience?
Sure. Do
We
you
only
want
have
me
a few minutes left before Ben needs to run, so let's yeah.
do you want to pick one, or do you want me to read one?
I like the one from Ruby,
Okay.
and it's for Ben. What was your biggest challenge in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Working with you every day, Rubes. Rubes is actually like my boss. But the hardest challenge in my career, I think it was actually when I left Calvin, was a hard one. I look at it now as a beautiful learning, but like it was tough. Like that place, it was a hard grind. It was a super commercial, but growing massive business, huge pressure. Didn't necessarily bring out the best in a lot of people. And it was a struggle. It made me, we sort of missed the blip because I left Calvin and I was like, okay, I'm going to make art for a year. And I ended up going and working with a guy called Rogan and his brand Loomstate for a year in between, which was this like super cool New York, based in Tribeca, hipster brand, guy that sort of reinvented denim back in the day and in New York, and worked with him for a year. And that was beautiful because I saw a completely different world after being saturated by like this commercial world for so long. But like I was burned out. I was done. I was in this little studio in Tribeca, and I had at the time J. Crew and Club Monaco trying to hire me. And I remember one day I got this bag sent through from J. Crew with a contract in it, more money than I'd ever earned. Like I didn't ask for it. And they were like, they sent it to me, this like beautiful leather bag with this contract. And I was like, I can't do it right now. I can't go back to that. I need to breathe for a minute. And that was, everything happens for a reason. That's when Andrew Rosen then was like, come and work at Theory. And I spent nearly 8 years working with him at Theory as creative director of men's there. So, that to me was like, it all aligned in the end.
Why did you choose Theory?
I loved the brand for years. Like the integrity of the product. I'm a minimalist. I think it stems from, I was thinking about it earlier because I knew we were doing this, and I was like, why are you a minimalist? And I was like, I think it's because like when I was growing up, some kids had 25 Star Wars figures. I had like 2, and I carried that little Ewok in my pocket every day to school. Like it was worth $1 million, and sort of you learn value that way, I think. And I think I learned that from my family and growing up, and I'm grateful to have been given that. I don't like unnecessary things. So I'm a bit purist in that way. I'm not good at getting rid of things either. Ruby can contest to that, but, or my partners, but I've never been good at getting rid of things. But yeah, I'm a minimalist, and I think the world needs more minimalists because we're cluttering this planet intensely right now.
Yes, that's true. And it's minimalism seems to be underappreciated at the moment in the time of sort of the digital age where you look at everything on your phone or your screen and it's small, and people want as much attention as possible. It's all about logos and it's loud. But I think there's the things are turning. Just like everything always goes together. It goes with politics, it goes with music, it goes with everything. And I feel, at least I'm hopeful that through this pandemic and through this sort of pause and that things are kind of turning in the right direction, because the last, you can, in politics, in American politics, there's obviously that whole thing, but even in fashion, fashion has been so, it's exhausting, I feel like. you know, like we said, that noise and that constant sort of battering, and I'm cooler, I'm bigger, this is more high, like all that kind of came together. And I feel like everybody is kind of exhausted. Like, who wants to always scream, you know? I don't like to scream ever, really, especially not for myself.
I think that there's so much noise out there that people find it very hard to just sit with themselves now and just be at one with themselves, right? And so that's why I'd sort of, you know, as a young designer, I'd be a better designer now if I'd meditated and done yoga like when I was younger. I'd be a better human being probably now, like, because what that instills in you is like having to be self-reliant, having to be in your own head, and so, you know, that consciousness to know noise and to noise is really important to find out what's important, because it clears the things that aren't important out of your brain.
Yeah, I agree. I know, Ben, you have to go. You have a meeting.
We got a few more minutes if you want it.
Yeah, definitely. Sean, have you been looking at the questions? Is there another one you want to fire off?
Yeah. I guess, give me 1 second. This one has to do with the collaborations that you guys did. The question was, give me a second. What were the creative drive and inspiration behind the prints in the collaborations?
So I think in our first meetings, one of the things that, you know, Ben and I were talking about was we're just kind of getting to know what Ben sort of liked of the work that I did, and getting to know more what Lululemon does. And one of the first things that we sort of touched on was that, you know, the Robert Geller brand, it is known, or part of what it's known for are the prints that we've done over the seasons. And I know from Ben that Lululemon, especially sort of his team had a really great team working on prints and dyes and all this development. So right away, that was a point of interest, I think, from both of us, that we wanted to work on. And then obviously
I've always admired your brand and your eye for color, for print, for artwork. You know, back in the day when I didn't have pennies to rub together, I remember buying a couple of like graphic T-shirts from your line, and you know, there's just a beauty in the way that you did them, because it had this hand-done nature to it, the sort of the wabi-sabi feel to them, which to me is really important when you're designing clothes. Try and not make everything as perfect.
Do you guys have time for
that's also that carried over into, if you look at the first collaboration with the dyes, that special dyeing technique that we used, each one is different, right? And each piece that you buy, the dye and the way that the color combinations run together and stuff, each one has a little bit of a variant, which is, for me, sort of the kind of the essence of what I like to do. You know, if I make 100 of something and everyone can be a little bit different, I'm super happy. So this whole idea of adding a little bit of a human touch to these clothes was really important, and I thought it was really successful.
There's a couple of questions in here, Robbie, that I just want to quickly touch on, like Max and Lindsay asking about like young designers getting into this world, and advice that we'd give them is, you know, right now you've got to be your own hero, but you got to be humble. I think that those two things, like, don't be afraid to reach out to people. I can see Brian here on the screen. Brian blind Instagrammed me, and like, he's been in conversation with my whole design team. and had meetings just from blind Instagramming me. Do that with people that you admire. Most people are good people and will try and help, especially if they've been in this jaded world for a long time, you know, because they want to be able to help and help you steer you on the way.
Yeah, I agree. But on the flip side, it's also when I see like a 16-year-old that's like, yo, I got my label and has all the thing, all this hype, and really he's made like bought a sweatshirt and dyed it like one color and maybe painted something on it. It's like, slow down. You don't need to be a superhero when you're, 16, 17 years old.
Just I think focus is really important.
Yeah, and learn and become good, become good. That's the most important thing. It's like work hard at learning things and becoming really good. And that's what matters. Then you'll be fine. You don't need to pretend to be good. People will find out eventually anyway. And like, just become good. Spend the time instead of hyping yourself up, learning, studying, geeking out, becoming an expert at something, and dedicating yourself to say that at the end of my life, I want to be one of the best people at this. Then you'll be successful.
Think about it like drawing or cooking or something like that. The first time you cook or you draw something, you probably like it because it was the first one you did, but it probably wasn't that good. And as you practiced and as you practiced and as you practiced, it got better and it got better and it got better. Allow that to happen with your career. Allow that to happen with your life. Don't think that you instantly, that first meal is going to be the best meal you've ever created, or that first drawing is going to be the best drawing that you've ever created. Because you'll look back in time and realize that actually that process, that learning is actually the beautiful phase. Because everyone's trying to speed everything up. Actually speed up by slowing down.
I agree.
Right. I think we have to wrap this up because Ruby is my boss and she's going to tell me I got to get out of here in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ben, for your beautiful stories. It's so nice to hear you talk. You've had such an amazing, you're in the midst of an amazing career and you're a great guy. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure. I've always respected you. I love you and your family, and Joe and his family, Joe's Blackbook, and everybody that joined. Thank you for joining. I'm humbled by all of you being here and showing up and being present and listening. And we didn't really get much drop off. It looked so like I take that these days with, likes on Instagram as that's a good thing, right?
That doesn't happen on our sessions. No one drops off. It's not a thing, Ben.
They're locked in. Yeah, and also thank you to Joe's Blackbook for having us here. Look out for the next session. They'll announce it, but they're always good. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Good night.
Big love to everybody and happy days for the future.